It is going to be warm today. We're looking at a high temperature in the low 60s. It's 52 already. And tomorrow we're looking at a temperature low to mid 60s. But we apparently are now expecting clouds both days. And then it'll rain this weekend. I know you're looking forward to that. Well, if you're working this weekend, you think, big deal. We need the rain. And then next week, as it clears out, it'll be colder. Well, again, my experience was when I was a kid, especially when we used to be able to go to St. Patrick's Day parades, was the weather would tease you several days before the parade. And then when you went to the parade, the weather was always terrible. There is no such thing as the luck of the Irish. The only luck the Irish have is bad luck. So I'm telling you that right now. And if you're of Irish ancestry, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But we are headed toward warmer weather with plenty of sunshine. And when that happens, you'll be having issues if you have a lot of windows in your homes. I knew this last year. During the summer, I was working at my computer next to a window. And in the afternoon, when the sun would really beat against that window, I had to literally move the table, the computer, and the chair away because of the intense heat that comes through that window. And you know what? In your automobile as well, your car or your truck, you see it all the time. So we've been recommending Tint Lady. Tint Lady with those window tints can actually come along and put window tints in and reduce that convection heat, reduce the use of your air conditioner, reduce your electric bill, meaning, of course, you'll eventually pay for the tints, and they'll do a free estimate. You might even want to drop by and say hello at the new office at 127 Filer Avenue, that down near the corner of Washington and Filer. You can get a free estimate. You can call 736-8469 or go online at tintladyidaho.com. They've been doing this now for nearly a quarter century in Twin Falls. Locally owned and operated, open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday by appointment only. And remember, don't squint, get tint. A couple of callers made reference to this yesterday, and we were talking about it on air a couple of weeks ago. And we had some pointed calls about it then, and I know people yesterday were worked up about it as well. They had a vote on a school bond, Cassia County, and guess what? The folks there aren't willing to pay a lot more money for school renovations after they were told just some months ago that they were done. Gosh, it'll be a little bit like someone coming along and telling you, you know what? You paid your taxes once, but now we're going to raise them because we felt you didn't pay enough. And so, but if you had a choice, you'd say, no, I've already paid them. This is a story from Magic Valley Times News. Lori Welsh, the reporter. Cassia County School District officials are looking toward the future after the district failed to achieve a supermajority vote on a $14.9 million, let's round that up, $15 million construction bond issue on Tuesday. $15 million. Oh, what's the big deal? I mean, come on. Just, you've all got more. You just don't realize it. You're spending way too much time on luxuries and things like that because, of course, Cassia County is right up there with Beverly Hills as one of the most wealthiest places in America. Good golly, we need more money, and if you don't give us more money, then your children will grow up and be dumb dummies. My guess is, my mom went to a two-room school through elementary school, and then she went to a centralized high school after that from 7th grade on, which was still rather tiny. But she went to a two-room school. Now, this was a woman, she didn't bother to go to college. She graduated high school and went directly to work at a bakery for a year. Still remember it. Bambi Bakery, it was called. She told me the stories when I was a kid. Bambi was, well, they didn't actually, put any venison in the baked goods. That just might be a rumor that got started. And then she went to work at a factory and spent like the next 44 years there, other than, leaving occasionally to have some children. But this woman could not only freely quote the Bible, but she could freely quote Shakespeare. And she got all that in a two-room school in a small, tiny rural high school. And yet today you've got to have all of these huge campuses with all of these after-school activities because, Abe Lincoln didn't play high school basketball. There were no school plays. And he didn't even go to formal schools. He just educated himself like a lot of people did at the time, and he saved the country. But apparently, we today, we have to have all of these big labs with rows and rows of computers and, carpeted floors and all of these amenities. The writer goes on to say school district officials sought the bond after it fell short on funds to complete all of the projects promised to voters when a 37 rounded up, bond construction issue passed last March. Now, the district was short because a previous architect who worked on the cost estimates underestimated several projects. Look, he wasn't off by just a smidgen. He was off by a mile. Call your lawyers and go squeeze him. 848. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The thing is, you cannot give these school districts enough money. They keep coming back because the administrators, they get paid on the size of the district, the number of the buildings, all of those things. They're looking to punch up their salaries. Never forget that. And their retirement benefits. 849. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You're up next. You're on the air.
Now, I hear what you're saying, and it's all fine and dandy. Back in the day, it's all get melancholic, and my dad was doing something and, working out in the fields and stuff. But I went to college. But if you check today, they made a comparison of European kids and the U.S. kids. Kids that dropped out of high school over there in Europe are a lot more smarter than they are here.
And we spend more money. Tell me how that works.
Okay. Hold on a minute. But this goes back to the balanced budget amendment. The first things that go are what schools, but when there's a surplus, you never hear them. And this I heard from Steve, if we wanted to, we could give it to them, but they don't want to. So what you're trying to say is, this is a liberty that you want with all these.
First of all, you're absolutely incoherent. That probably brings up one thing about the public school system in the United States. Number two, in Europe, they basically have homogenized populations. They don't have to try to educate people who've like maybe some of your cousins who've come across the border in the middle of the night and then have all of these special needs. So then we have to throw 50%, 60%, 70% of our budgets at that. Then we have to go out and hire all of these English as a second language teachers to address all of those differences. And yet we keep hearing, well, yes, but diversity makes us stronger. No evidence to that. And what would a balanced budget amendment, which was a federal thing, talking about an amendment to the U.S. Constitution, what in blazes would that have to do with a school bond issue? Hello? That's why I say some people are absolutely incoherent. I have a friend from Denmark. I knew him in high school. He was an exchange student. He came here. He befriended my brother and me, and we got to be quite close, and he told us a lot about what schools were like in his country. On the other hand, back then they didn't have, of course, the Muslim hordes showing up. They were just educating Danish people. That was it. They didn't have to teach 15, 16, 17, 25, 30 languages. I mean, in New York City schools, they're teaching Tagalog, for crying out loud. You got to hire a whole group of people who speak Tagalog so you can talk to the students who speak Tagalog, so then you can convince them to eventually speak English. Now, there was a time when people came to this country from Italy and the Basque region of Spain, and they came here from Poland, and they came here from countries all over Ukraine, and they came here, and guess what? They learned English very quickly. It helped move them along. I mean, the quicker you get a handle on the language, and language is actually culture. Language and culture are pretty much are synonymous things. Once you get a handle on that, then it's a lot easier to make a living. You can go apply for a job. I'll tell you right now, there was a guy, he's passed away. Gosh, he was a legend back east. His name was Gino, and he owned Gino Steaks. This was a famous restaurant in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There was Pat's and Gino's, and they competed with each other, but what they did is they would sell Philly cheesesteaks, a very famous sandwich. Gino was selling 4,500 sandwiches a day, mostly during the lunch hour. He had to have an assembly line process, so he decided to hang a sign in the window that said, "You got to order in English." And the lefties started screaming, "How dare he? He's a bigoted piece of..." Well, we won't go quite that far. But it's the only way he could officially run his business. If he had to hire a bunch of translators, all of a sudden he's not selling 4,500 sandwiches a day. He may not sell 450. Then he has to close his doors. Then he has to lay off all of his people. Then they have to go on welfare. Do you not get this? What part of it does not get through the stupid, thick craniums of American Democrats? You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Go ahead.
Well, this is another example of the thing you're talking about. in California, in Los Angeles, there was a gentleman who recently moved up here who was a client of mine. He told me, he says, Los Angeles is the new capital of Mexico. And my wife and I have done research on the underground economy in Mexico, in Los Angeles.
Yeah, what's the difference?
Yeah, and how massive it is, and how it's breaking down traditional forms of employment and tax paying and everything. And you see, it's the kind of chaos that you see across the border. To go to Nogales, Arizona, it's traditionally, whatever you call it, white, I guess. And you look across the border, it's a damn hellhole. And you say to yourself, the outskirts of Mexico City are hell on earth, period. And you say, do we really want this to happen? It's happening in California right now.
It's happening in Jerome, Idaho, as you well know.
Yes, it is. I grew up in Jerome, and Main Street, I used to drag Main when I was a kid. And I go down Main Street now, and I say to myself, well, there was this Penny's, this was the Idaho department stores. We had a couple of pharmacies. It was all pretty normal. Now, I don't know what the hell you call it.
A mess. Hey, thank you much for the call. Victor Davis Hanson, if I get a chance, I want to mention him later in the program. Great scholar from the Hoover Institute at Stanford University, great writer, famous historian. Grew up in the Imperial Valley of California, and he went back there a few years ago, and he wrote a column about how dangerous it is. And he said, it's looking third world. Well, that's because when you open the border, you allow the third world to come in. And he said that the big money making that people do anymore there is stealing all of the copper from fixtures and the metals they can from local farms. And you better be darn careful if you walk out and confront these people, because they'll shoot you dead on your own property. It's a complete, absolute mess, and you can thank the Democrat Party and really, as well, those people who call themselves Main Street Republicans, the Chamber of Commerce, for encouraging this across the country. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, cheap labor at your expense. And then they wonder why Donald Trump has some success when he's campaigning. Getting back to the schools, though, for just a moment. I'm sorry, but the people of Cassia County, they didn't follow up the estimate. And you know what? You're going to have to learn to live within your means. In a country that has $20 billion in debt officially, and probably far, far worse, maybe over $100 trillion, the gravy train has come to a stop, folks, or it's going to very, very soon. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley at 8:56 on Top Story.
Hey, you were talking about Jerome County. Jerome, what is the biggest economical thing in Jerome? It's dairies, right?
Dairies or Walmart?
Okay, well, dairies, and then them guys hire the illegal aliens to come work in their dairies, and so they're a big cause of the problem with the immigration over there in Jerome.
Some of those people, though, who are hired are actually documented in the sense that they're not citizens, but they work on those guest worker programs. There are some of those working in farming. I have a friend who owns an apple farm, and he does paperwork on that. However, let me add to this. I agree with you on the point that a good many of them are just simply here illegally. I had a state legislator, I heard him making a presentation over at a hotel here in town one day a few months ago, and he pointed out, he said, I used to hire local high school kids, and on day 2, I'd go to pick them up at their houses, make it easy on them. He'd pick them up, and he says, Mom would meet me at the door and say, oh, he's not feeling well, he's going to sleep in late today. And he said, I've never had anybody who was a Mexican worker do that to me. Well, once again, maybe we get back to our school system and how we've raised our kids and what we've told them expectations are and convinced them that they're all entitled to something for doing nothing. Maybe our current cultural approach, the liberalism that has dominated this country for the last 50 years that says you can get something for nothing, has led to that. And therefore, when somebody says, yeah, I bring these guys out and they're unreliable, but if I bring out, Jose and Esteban, they show up and they bend their back over and work hard all day long. So, yes, we've lost something. And maybe it goes back to our schools and the way we've raised our children and all of those expectations. We've got more coming up in the next hour. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 13. It's a shame, by the way, when Walmart is competing with your dairy industry to be the biggest biggest employer in town, isn't it? That's why nobody's left downtown selling anything. News is next at 9 o'clock, and one more hour of the program just ahead. More of your telephone calls, too.